Hello, so I wanted to talk about plyometrics and power exercises for runners and how they can be useful in terms of performance and in terms of rehabilitation. I think these are terms that people have probably heard, plyometrics and power, but there's probably a bit of misunderstanding around what the definitions are, what actually a plyometric is versus what a power exercise is, and some examples of how they can be useful for runners and how they can be implemented by runners. So plyometric exercise, we'll talk about the differentiation between plyometric and power. Okay, so plyometric is basically an exercise that involves a landing followed by a fast propulsion back up off the ground. Okay, so by definition, there has to be a landing followed by a takeoff again, and we need to have minimal contact time on the ground. So it needs to be an explosive movement back up off the ground. That's what a plyometric exercise is. Okay, so that's the first thing to say, because a lot of people will think that plyometrics are just kind of box jumps and squat jumps and all these different things. They're not by definition plyometrics, but they often get all kind of lumped in to the same category. And there are some key differences, not just in terms of the terminology, but in what the benefits and what the uses are of those different types of exercises. Okay, so some examples of a plyometric exercise could be like some repeated hops or jumps or bounding exercises, things like that, where you are landing, you're taking off again. Okay, a depth jump, probably people are not so familiar with the terminology of this one. I've got a little video just to demonstrate this, so I'm just going to play this now. Okay, so that's a single leg depth jump from a step. The idea of that is that you're using a step to give yourself a little bit more kind of impact into the ground, so it makes it a little bit more challenging. And the idea is you hit the ground onto that one leg, and then you're trying to get as high as you can back up off the ground in as short amount of time as possible. So we're using our muscles obviously to produce this, but part of the training effect is actually in the tendon, and I'm going to move on to explain the relevance and the importance of that in just a moment. Okay, so key benefits of plyometrics, generally speaking, I've kind of touched upon the relevance of running a little bit, but running obviously has a short contact time. So this is why we're banging on about plyometrics being useful for runners. Okay, so every step that you take when you're running, generally there's a short contact time, and then you're taking off again. So if we can isolate that attribute and that property and train it and improve it, then that can potentially benefit your running performance, your running economy. I've just touched upon the muscle and tendon benefits. Just to expand on that a little bit more, because I think this is a really important thing when it comes to plyometrics. I want to focus on the tendon side of this. So tendon is, as most people will probably be aware, is the bit that attaches the muscle into the bone. Okay, so I'm going to use the Achilles tendon as an example of how plyometric exercise can be useful. So the Achilles tendon's role in running, when you're taking a step when you're running, so your foot hits the ground, you get a stretch that goes into the Achilles tendon. So the Achilles tendon lengthens slightly, and then you get this elastic recoil of the tendon. Okay, so it's like a spring or an elastic band where it lengthens out a little bit and then it snaps back. Okay, and that is very useful for us when we're running because it's kind of free energy. Okay, so you're not using your muscles to do that. It's just something that's happening in the tendon, and it's giving you that propulsion off the ground, and we can really utilize that. If we're utilizing that well, then our muscles aren't going to get so fatigued, our running economy is going to improve, our performance is going to improve, we're going to get less fatigued less quickly. So that's a really, really important and really useful thing. And plyometrics, we can really target those tendon properties and improve those tendon properties. So for some people, with tendons, we want tendons to be stiff. We want them to be elastic, like I was just saying. For some people, they can lose this kind of stiffness and this elasticity a little bit in their tendons. And plyometrics, we know that they can help to improve that elasticity and that stiffness in the tendon so that it's acting as a really efficient spring. Okay, so that's one of the real key benefits of plyometric exercises for runners. When it comes to power, so the difference between power and our plyometrics, Power is simply the ability to produce force quickly. So unlike the plyometrics, we don't need the landing component necessarily. It's just a fast production of force. Okay, some examples could be a box jump or a squat jump. So you're squatting down and then you're exploding up as quickly as you can and as strongly as you can. But we're not so worried about the landing when it comes to these. You'll land, you'll absorb the force again. You can take your time if you want, and then you do the next rep. Okay, kettlebell swing would be similar. Okay, there's a fast production of force, but we're not leaving the ground with a kettlebell swing. An Olympic lift is maybe the ultimate example of this in many ways, where it's just an expression of force produced really quickly at maximal levels. So that's what power is all about. Okay, and this can still be very useful for runners. It's still very important for runners. You'll get a certain bit of crossover with the power properties and the plyometric properties, but we probably want to train both of them. Okay, so a little bit similar to what I was saying with the plyometrics, running requires fast production of force. Okay, so we need to be strong, and we want to have strength exercises that are not focused on power and plyometrics as well in our program, so that we develop that strength base. Okay, but we also, when we're running, we need to produce this force quickly. We don't have long on the ground to express that strength. Okay, we need to be able to produce that strength, that force quickly. Okay, one of the things about power, interestingly, is that it is lost a little bit more with age than some of our other fitness properties. So strength and endurance can maybe be maintained relatively well as time goes on, but power maybe diminishes a little bit more quickly than some of those other properties. So we want to train these properties so that we can mitigate that and slow down that loss of power as much as possible as time goes on. So this is definitely a consideration for runners who might be in the slightly older age categories. So I forgot to show you this video, which is just an example of a power exercise that I like using for runners. The reason I like using this is it's a single leg power exercise. Okay, so we're gonna sink down into the movement slowly, explode up as quickly as possible. Okay, trying to get nice and high. If you wanted to, you might even add some weight so that you're producing that force with some real resistance there as well. Okay, different to the plyometric exercise because we're spending a lot more time on the ground. We're just focused on a fast production of force.